Welcome to PsychoMinds. Here psychology is simplified, clear, and based on science. Consciousness is one of the most complex and fascinating phenomena studied by psychology and neuroscience. In simple terms, consciousness can be defined as the capacity to be aware of oneself and the environment, to perceive internal and external stimuli, and to experience thoughts, emotions, sensations, and intentions. However, this apparently simple definition hides a deep scientific complexity. From a psychological perspective, consciousness is not a single entity or a static state. It is a dynamic process that allows the individual to integrate sensory information, memories, emotions, and goals into a coherent subjective experience. Being conscious means not only perceiving the world, but also knowing that one is perceiving it. Historically, consciousness was the central object of study in early psychology, especially in structuralism and introspectionism. Over time, due to methodological limitations, it temporarily lost prominence in favor of behaviorism. However, with advances in cognitive psychology and neuroscience, consciousness has returned to the center of scientific investigation. Today, consciousness is understood as a functional process essential for decision-making, learning, emotional regulation, and social interaction. Without consciousness, complex human behavior as we know it would not be possible. Understanding consciousness, therefore, is not merely a philosophical exercise, but a fundamental scientific endeavor to understand the human mind. Consciousness is not an all-or-nothing phenomenon. Instead, it exists in different levels and states that can vary according to physiological conditions, psychological factors, and environmental influences. Psychology distinguishes between normal states of consciousness and altered states of consciousness. Normal consciousness includes wakefulness, alertness, focused attention, and the ability to respond coherently to the environment. Within this state, attention can fluctuate, moving from highly focused concentration to more diffuse awareness, such as during daydreaming. Altered states of consciousness include sleep, dreaming, hypnosis, meditation, dissociative states, and conditions induced by substances or neurological disorders. In these states, perception, time awareness, self-identity, and emotional processing may be significantly modified. Clinically, alterations in consciousness are critically important. Conditions such as delirium, coma, minimally conscious states, and dissociative disorders reveal how fragile and complex conscious experience is. Small disruptions in brain function can profoundly change awareness and perception of reality. Studying these variations helps psychology and neuroscience understand not only pathological conditions, but also the mechanisms that sustain consciousness in everyday life. Consciousness, therefore, is best understood as a spectrum, not a single fixed state. Modern science has demonstrated that consciousness does not reside in a single location in the brain. There is no center of consciousness. Instead, conscious experience emerges from the interaction of multiple brain regions working together as a complex network. Key structures involved include the prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive functions and self-awareness, the thalamus, which acts as a central relay for sensory information, and large-scale attentional and integrative networks that connect different cortical and subcortical regions. Neuroscience shows that damage to specific areas does not eliminate consciousness entirely, but can alter its content, clarity, or continuity. This reinforces the idea that consciousness is an emergent property of distributed neural activity rather than a localized function. Functional neuroimaging studies reveal that conscious perception depends on synchronized activity across brain regions. When this integration is disrupted, as in certain neurological conditions, conscious experience becomes fragmented or diminished. Understanding the neural basis of consciousness bridges psychology and biology, allowing a scientific explanation of subjective experience grounded in observable. Despite significant advances, consciousness remains one of the greatest challenges in science. Several fundamental questions continue to guide research. Is consciousness an emergent property of neural complexity? Can consciousness exist without language? Is it possible to measure consciousness objectively? Some theories propose that consciousness arises when information is integrated across large neural networks. Others emphasize the role of attention, working memory, or predictive processing. No single theory has yet fully explained all aspects of conscious experience. Another critical question concerns the relationship between consciousness and self-awareness. While many organisms may possess basic forms of consciousness, human self-reflective awareness appears to involve higher-order cognitive processes. Scientific research seeks measurable correlates of consciousness, known as neural correlates of consciousness, NCCs. These correlates help identify which brain processes are necessary and sufficient for conscious experience. These questions demonstrate that consciousness is not only a psychological topic, but an interdisciplinary frontier connecting psychology, neuroscience, philosophy, and artificial intelligence. Understanding consciousness has profound implications for clinical practice, education, ethics, and self-knowledge. In psychology and psychiatry, assessing consciousness is essential for diagnosis, treatment, and patient safety. Clinically, disturbances of consciousness help differentiate neurological and psychiatric conditions. In education, understanding attention and awareness improves learning strategies and cognitive development. In everyday life, consciousness shapes identity, decision-making, and emotional regulation. Beyond practical applications, studying consciousness deepens our understanding of what it means to be human. It challenges simplistic views of the mind and replaces them with a scientifically grounded, yet deeply nuanced perspective. Consciousness is not a mystical phenomenon detached from biology, nor a simple byproduct of the brain. It is a complex, dynamic process at the core of human experience. Here at PsychoMinds, psychology is explained with clarity and scientific responsibility. Subscribe to the channel and become part of a community dedicated to understanding the mind through evidence-based knowledge. Here on PsychoMinds, we explain psychology with clarity and scientific responsibility. Subscribe and be part of a community focused on learning and understanding the mind.